It's oft times I dream of returning to my home in the Emerald Isle, where peace and contentment abounding and laughter was heard all the while. I see once again my companions, and I in their midst I go soon, sharing the dreams of my childhood, near my home at the foot of Slieve Bloom. I'd stroll once again through the heather, I gaze on the fast flowing stream, our nature embedded with beauty, more beautiful now in my dream. I hear the clear notes of the fiddle, it plays out a gay lilting tune. There's dancing tonight by the crossroads, near my home at the foot of Slieve Bloom.
Hello, here we are today in the townsland of Nealstown in the parish of Camross on the Laois-Offaly border. We are here today to interview Paddy Dooley about his life and times growing up in this area. Paddy, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, Peter.
Paddy, looking at this house wasn't built today or yesterday.
That's quite true, Peter. This house was built by my grandfather in 1906, 1907. My grandfather, James Dooley, he married my grandmother, Gret Higgins, from Ballycmore in 1907. They had 3 children. There was my mother, there was my Aunt Rita, who was Mrs. Dempsey of Killavella, and my Aunt Maureen, who contracted TB and died young in 1932. This house cost £300 at the time of building, and we actually have the receipts still. And as I said, it was my grandfather who built it. He came down from across the fields from the county bounds, so perhaps we should go up to the county bounds and have a look around.
Here we are up in the county bounds, the ancestral home of the Dooleys. Paddy, could you tell us a bit about this place?
This is the ancestral home of the Dooleys. The Dooleys are here, we reckon, at least since 1750, or possibly before it. They came from Brahal, which is a place between Kilcormac and Ferban, and they settled on the slopes of the Slieve Bloom Mountains, and they're here since then. There was one particular, my great-grandmother, I'd like to say a few words about her if I could. She was Margaret Ryan, and she was from Drumban in Upperchurch. And she married my great-grandfather. She was born in 1834. And the thing about it is, she was from, at that time, in Drumban, she was a native Irish speaker. Irish was still being spoken in Drumban. And when she came up here, they always said the rosary in Irish when they came up here. And there was a great Gaelic scholar in this parish by the name of Father Dan Collier, who was an oblate father. He was a brother of Bishop Collier's. He wrote several books in Irish, and he say in the first half of the 20th century. And he always said that he got his love of Irish from coming up here and talking in Irish to old Mrs. Dooley. And you know, I suppose I have heard this story time and time again, and it influenced me in that whenever I say a few words in public, I always say a couple of Fuckalas Gaeilge.
This place in its day looked like it was a fine farm holding.
This was part of the Coot estate. And Coote, as you know, was in Ballyfin House, but his estates came down as far as here. As I was saying to you before, this is the county bounds, and it's called the county bounds because it's on the bounds, actual bounds between Counties Laois and Counties Offaly. And I have here with me, dated 1907, we have a receipt from Sir Charles Algernon Coote for rent paid in 1907. I consider this to be a very, very historical document. And I also have a memory card, which is a photograph of the lady that I was talking to you, Margaret Ryan.
Oh, that's amazing, Paddy. That's going back a long way. So that the Coote estate would have been a massive estate. That you're talking about Ballyfin to the far end of the county boundary here. So a huge estate.
It was a huge estate. He was the landlord,
Yeah.
and it was a huge estate. It took in, I suppose, most of Camross,
Right.
if not all of it.
Right.
And Ballyfin and
Right.
Ashery Walsh, they took over half the country.
Right. And the last, Paddy, when was this last house last lived in?
This was lived in until 1944. The last man to live here was Michael Dooley, who would have been a granduncle of mine. He left here to go live down in Killavella. Pierce Dooley was the last man to die out of this place, was Pierce Dooley, his brother, and he died in 1943. As a child, I remember coming up here as a child, and it was it was heavenly. That's all about it. And it was considered in its time to be one of the nicest houses. It was a thatched house, one of the nicest houses in the place. And I remember Pierce and Mick, and they were two grand men. And there was a little stream out there, and at that time, before the whole place was poisoned with forestry, there was fish in the river. And there was a little trout came up there, and they used to be showing me the trout, and I thought I could play with the trout and take it out of the water and pull it back. After the trout died, and I thought I'd get the works for that, but I didn't.
You have a story about Margaret Ryan. Will you tell us about it?
The story is told that she was here on her own one day, and she was in the kitchen, and suddenly a little small ferryman appeared in the middle of the kitchen floor, and she was frightened, but he said, "Don't be frightened. I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm coming here to warn you that be prepared for bad news within the next few days." And then he disappeared. And within a few days, she got word that her brother in Drumban in Upper Church had been killed in a fall from a horse.
God, amazing. Okay, we'll probably have a look at that, the list now on the way back. That's lovely, Paddy. We'll head on to our next destination now.
Okay, all right.
We're here at the Liss, or Ring Fort, at Pierce's Hill. Could you tell us a bit about this place?
Yeah, this was a relatively important liss or fort in ancient times. It was known as Liss na Gaelig Leinig, or the Liss of the Old Woman of Leinster. And it was of sufficient importance to merit mention in the Book of Leinster. Now, the Book of Leinster was an ancient Irish manuscript that was written in the 9th or the 10th centuries. And in it there's a discourse between the lady of the house, as it were, here, and a representative from the King of Munster. And it went like this. It was harvest time, and the harvest was over, and she was paying the labourers. Now she was paying them either in full or in part with a loaf of bread. And each one of them was getting a loaf of bread. And there was this fella in the queue, and he came up, and she says to him, "You haven't been involved in the harvest. I've no loaf of bread for you." And he says to her, "Do you know who I am?" She said, "No." And he says, "I am a representative of the King of Munster, and if I don't get a loaf of bread, I will call on all the warriors of Munster." And he goes on to list all the different warriors from Munster. He says, "I will call on those people. They will come here and they will lay waste to this place." And she wasn't worried in a bit. She says to him, "Bring them on. But if you do, I'll call on the warriors of Leinster, and the warriors of Leinster will drive you back down into Munster." And it continued on that for a couple of pages, and it sort of petered out in the finish. Now, you know, there are a lot of stories about this place, and I'll tell you one of them. There was a family of Dooleys lived in Stoke, and it was the springtime of the year, and they decided it was time to get the horse shod before the spring work would start. So they hooked the horse to the cart and off with them down to Roscommore to Cordial's Forge, got the horse shod, and on their way back when they got as far as Nealstown Bridge, which incidentally we'll be going down to later on, one of the brothers got down and said he'd be faster walking, and took off and came home. He had the dinner, an hour passed, 2 hours passed, not a sign of the brother. So down the road they came after him anyway, and here they found him pulled into the side of the road here, and he in a kind of a trance. And they said to him, what kept you? And he was annoyed. He says, listen, he says, you're after interrupting me. I was listening to the grandest fairy music that I ever heard in my life. And you know, when we were growing up here, that was a kind of a forbidden place. We wouldn't be allowed in there. People thought there was bad luck attached to it. Yeah. An example of that was at Christmas time when you'd be gathering holly. And sometimes at some Christmases, holly was very scarce, but there always seemed to be holly in there. But you wouldn't go in and get a bit, not in 1,000 years. So that's my story of Lisny Galligleinig.
We're here at Nealstown Bridge, and it takes its name from the local townsland. Could you tell us a bit about this place?
Yeah, I could indeed. The name Nealstown, that's derived from the fact that there were so many families of the name O'Neill living here at one stage. At Griffith's valuation in 1849, there were 5 O'Neill families living here. Now, Paddy Clooney, who was the late Paddy Clooney, a great local historian, said that at one stage there were 7 O'Neill families living here. And you might ask the question, why so many O'Neill families? Mm-hmm. Well, in 1601, the armies of O'Neill and O'Donnell came down from Kinnetty, down over Nealstown Bridge, on towards Rossgray, a short distance down that road they turned left, crossed the mountain at the Yellow Gap or the Barnaby, and on to Kinsale. And as we all know, they were badly beaten at Kinsale and marked the end of the old Gaelic order. And on their way back, on their retreat back to Ulster, a lot of families stopped off. And I think that's the reason why from here over as far as Cadamstown, you'll get so many families with the name O'Neill, or so many Ulster families, like O'Neill, Donnelly, O'Donnell, Bradley, Heaney, Corrigan, McGuinness, all Ulster names, all particularly in Tyrone and Derry, and hence the reason that this townsland was called Nealstown. Before that it was called Ballylyrock. That was the ancient Irish name for it, and that meant the Forked Pass. And that's exactly, if you only look at it, that's exactly what it is. The road comes down from Camross, it forks to the right to go to Kinnetty, and it forks to the left to go to Rossgray.
Very interesting.
Now, where we're sitting here in this lovely little spot here alongside the Moneen River, here right at Nealstown's Bridge, this little picnic area originally was developed by Foss, and we maintain it, the local families here maintain it ever since. And that bridge, Nealstown Bridge, lovely bridge I think, in 1917, that bridge, there was heavy floods. That bridge was undermined and was dangerous. And it was necessary to repair it. And the contract was given to the Delaney's of Northgrove in Camross. And there's a story told about it, that they were working on it here one day and a car came up the road. Now I can't remember whether the car was from the Rosses from Burr or the Vessies of Abbeyleix, I can't remember which. But they got out of the car and started talking to the workers, and Mick Delaney was the foreman. And Mick started hopping and round here and there and an awful limp and everything. And your man says to him, "My good man," he says, "you're very lame, what happened to you?" And Mick saw war wounds. And your man says, my good man, you fought for king and country. I'm proud of you. Puts his hand in his pocket, gives Mickey a fiver. And they left. I'm sure they weren't around the corner and Mickey was dancing jigs. It was the handiest fiver he ever earned in his life.
Very good.
But as I say, it's an absolutely lovely bridge. And there's another little feature of it, and we'll be showing it to you. There's a crow's foot or a trigonometrical sign here which shows the height above sea level. I think it's 726 feet above sea level that it is.
Very good. And that's on the bridge, Paddy?
That's on the bridge, exactly, yeah.
Very interesting.
As I was just saying, this stone here is the crow's foot which I was referring to. That's there since the 19th century. It was put there by the Ireland Survey people when they were doing their survey in Ireland. And it's either, and I'm not sure, it's either 726 feet or 762 feet above sea level. Now, we always said that if you stood at this side of it, you were in Nealstown and in County Laois. Take one step, you're in Gorteen in County Offaly. And if you went back far enough to olden times, I now would be standing in the province of Munster, because this was Ely O'Carroll territory, which was in the province of Munster. Take a step back, I'm back in County Laois, but in ancient times it was Upper Ossory and in the province of Leinster. So it's a provincial divide as well as a county divide.
This house was built in 1907, and in the subsequent years in Irish history were very turbulent. This house played a part in those times.
It did, and it played a very important role during the War of Independence. This house, for some time prior to the signing of the truce in July 1921, was the headquarters of the 3rd Southern Division of the IRA. And the territory covered by the 3rd Southern Division of the IRA was Counties Laois and Offaly and Northwest Tipperary. But this house, the association of this house with that War of Independence started well before 1921. It was a safe house. In other words, those on the run came here in times of trouble. The first man on the run to stay here was Seamus Burke. Now, Seamus Burke was from Rock Forest, Knock, in County Tipperary, and he was on the run after an ambush near Templemore. And the interesting thing about it is that while he was here, he wrote a book about the principles of local government, and we have this book here today, and there it is. That book, a lot of that book was written while Seamus Burke was here on the run. Now, subsequent to that, in the years 1920 and that, this house was a safe place for an awful lot of volunteers, especially from around Nina, because it was around Nina and Clough-Jordan and Borrisicane that a lot of the activity during the War of Independence took place. And some of the names which my mother and grandmother used to talk about was McCurtain from Nina, McCormack from Nina, P.J. Starr from Nina, Sean Gaynor from Nina, who was one of the principal soldiers in the War of Independence. A brother of Dick Mulcahy's, P.A. Mulcahy, stayed here at that time. And they used to talk to us about 2 raids that took place here. The first raid took place, it was the RIC from Rossgrey, and they came out. And at the time, my mother was in bed with the measles. And they were quite polite about it, actually. My grandfather said to the sergeant, look, and he says, there's a daughter of mine in there, she has the measles, I prefer you didn't go into that bedroom. And they didn't. Now, the second one was a little more serious, the second raid. And there's a story leading up to that raid that I'll have to tell you. Roundwood House up in Camross, up towards Killymoor, was raided for arms. It was raided by the local volunteers. And one of those was a man called Martin Connors, a neighbour who lived down the road. And one of the things that they brought out of Roundwood House was a set of binoculars. And Martin brought up the binoculars to show them to my grandmother and grandfather. And he was showing them, and while he was here showing them the binoculars, who drove into the yard a Crossley tender with auxiliaries and RIC. Martin went white in the face. If he was caught with this binoculars, he was in serious trouble, and that's putting it mildly. My grandfather did not. My mother was up at the window and she was doing the washing in a wash tub, and my grandfather did nothing. Whipped the binoculars out of Martin's hands, stuffed them down into the wash basin, and they searched the house from top to bottom, and they never thought of looking in the wash basin. And Martin Connors, he subsequently became a detective down in Limerick, and every time he came home on holidays, he used to come up to see my grandmother. He was forever grateful for that particular event.
And Paddy, was there a bunker up the road during that time?
There was a bunker up the road there at that time. It was on the river. I showed you the Mooneen River there earlier, and if you went up that river about half a mile or so, there was a concrete bunker built into the side of the river, and it was used to store arms during the War of Independence. And you know, we're sitting here at this table, but it was at this table and in this room that men sat who were responsible for winning freedom for at least part of this country. And you know, we're very proud of that. We're very, very proud of that. And mention of the part that this house played in the War of Independence, it's mentioned in Sean Gaynor's book about the Gaynors of Tyrone, and again Sean Hogan mentions it in his book, which he wrote recently about the War of Independence in North Tipperary. And we were down there at the bridge recently, and I often thought, you know, I suppose the armies of O'Neill and O'Donnell came this way, and they went down in their thousands. They came back broken, beaten, battered and bruised. On the day of the truce, the active service unit from North Tipperary marched up that road to bivouac in Derlahan. There were less than 100, I suppose, but yet they managed to bring the mighty British Empire to their knees and force them to give independence to part of the country. So that's that was the part that this house played in the War of Independence. One sad thing about it, I suppose, was that my grandfather, who had saved Martin Connors, maybe he saved his life that time, who knows, didn't live to see the fruits of what he had worked for, because he died on the same day that Michael Collins died. And he died in the Mater Hospital in Dublin, and there was awful trouble to getting the remains back down here. And in actual fact, his brother Pierce, on the day of Michael Collins' funeral, sent that telegram here to say that the remains would be arriving in Roscrea by train that evening.
And Paddy, in relation to that, and you spoke of Michael Collins' funeral, I think you have a government bond there signed by Michael Collins.
We have indeed. We have a government bond for £10, quite a lot of money in that time, signed by Michael Collins. It was the family's contribution, really. It was the family's contribution to the war effort. That's what it was. And we have that, a treasured memento of those times.
And Paddy, there was also a photograph, I think, of a meeting that I think took place in this room.
There was Sean Gaynor was in it, and Jack Collison of Moneygall, and McCormack, I can't think of his first name now, from Nina. And there were pictures sitting at this table. That picture is in Sean Hogan's book about the IRA in North Tipperary.
After the War of Independence came the Civil War. Did this house play any part in that?
No, they took absolutely no part, good, bad or indifferent, in the Civil War. There was just one little episode, all right, that happened, and it was in connection with my father. My father had a car at that time, and it was very unusual at that time for someone to have a car. And he was going down to Waterford to visit his sister Molly, who Molly owned Dooley's Hotel in Waterford. And he was driving through Kilkenny. And Kilkenny City at the time was held by the Free State forces, and Waterford was in the hands of the Republican forces. But while he was going through Kilkenny, he was stopped, and the car was commandeered, because the forces of the Free State that were in Kilkenny were preparing to march in Waterford. And the car was commandeered, and he was forced to drive the car in the column, advancing on Waterford City and carrying the officer commanding, a man called General Paul, down into Waterford. Now, it had a good ending for him, because he successfully managed to get back his car when the whole thing was over. But at the time, it must have been a pretty unsettling experience for him.
Paddy, the Second World War, I know it was called a different name at the time here. Have you any memories of that, childhood memories?
Yeah, I was only about 4 or 5 at the time. I remember in 1939 that my father took me as a youngster. It's one of my earliest memories to the All-Ireland of 1939. It was the Thunder and Lightning All-Ireland. I remember nothing good, bad or indifferent about the hurling match, but what I do remember is people talking in concerned tones about this awful event that was after taking place in Europe. And I have that distinct memory of it. Now, as regards, it was called the emergency, as you say, in this country. I suppose rationing was the principal thing I remember. Everything was rationed. Tea and sugar, and cars had to go off the road because there was no petrol available. Ration books were issued to everyone. And I remember, if there was a big family, each one got a ration book. So consequently, any family with a good, any couple that had quite a number of children, say, had quite a number of ration books, and maybe they were able to build up a little surplus of tea and sugar. And I know of one particular family in the locality who could afford to sell that little bit of a surplus on the black market to others. I can remember that well. Other memories of it, I can remember going to school. We went to school in Killavella, coming home from school one evening, it was around the month of October, I think, and suddenly looking up, and here were 2 planes crossing from southeast to northwest. I remember they were black. I can remember the colour of them quite well. They were black, one after the other, going slowly. Now, whether they were German planes or English planes, I don't know, but it was obvious that there were planes which related to either side in the war. Another bit of excitement that happened around was the barrage balloons. Now, barrage balloons were used in the big cities in London. They were a protection against air raids. How successful they were, I don't know, but sometimes they broke loose of their moorings. And one of them broke loose and must have crossed the Irish Sea, and it got tangled up in the Shannon poles, as they used to call them at the time, down in Killavella. And I remember the great excitement there was about this thing, and the guards were out and the army was out. And I remember seeing it, the remains of it, the wires and all that, in Dempsey's Haggard. There are 2 memories now that I particularly can remember about the war.
And Paddy, you followed a bit maybe on the radio, on the wireless.
We did indeed, yeah. In particular, there was a gentleman who went famously by the name of Lord Haw-Haw. William Joyce was his name. He was broadcasting from Germany, and of course he was broadcasting propaganda from Germany to England, England in particular. But you could pick it up on the radio. The British did their best to blacken it out. I don't know what the exact word is, but you could pick it up at times. And I remember my father, especially if a Sunday night, he'd be twiddling the buttons on the radio. Finally, Lord Haw-Haw would break out, and there'd be silence ordered to listen to what Lord Haw-Haw had to say about the war. I can distinctly remember that memory. And there was about the war on the radio, general reports on radio air, but it used to be heavily censored. To find out what's going on, you'd really want to read between the lines of what they were saying.
So overall, Paddy, the emergency hadn't that much of an impact on you?
It hadn't really, because everyone was in the same boat, and you got on with life, and it seemed all the restrictions that were there, they seemed to be normal.
So, as Peter and my dad were talking about the emergency, on the occasion of my dad's 80th birthday in July 2014, I just composed a short poem which was inspired by a story that he used to tell about Christmas 1945, going in with his parents to Roscrea in the back of a horse and trap. So, Christmas 1945. 69 years ago, in a fear and devastation, explosive hope and liberation, a horse and cart trudges through snow. Nealstown Bridge, the Piper's Walls, the Folly Lane, Lochal, Killavella, Neil's, Reardon's, Dooley's Matters, Quinlan's, Dempsey's and Rose. Brimming with excitement was the boy of 11, lying in the back, a gaze at the heavens. It was Christmas time, 1945. Europe on her knees, yet survived. The topic under discussion, to those in the know, a book and an orange, to help mind and body grow. pieces of joy peeping from De Valera's blanket of woe. As far from the war as one could possibly be, and yet the newspapers from that August portrayed a grim chronology. They covered the messages in the back of the cart: turkey, a ham, some coal for the hearth. The dark-haired boy considered the photo: mushroom-shaped clouds, distant skies aglow. A terrible danger unleashed on mankind, but nothing to fear in Nealstown's confines.
This house was known as a rambling house.
That's right. Every Sunday night when we were young, growing up, the house would fill up. I suppose there could be 10, 12, 13 people come in. And cards, have a game of cards. The game of cards that they played around here, it was a very popular game up around Camross, was Nap. You wouldn't hear of it now at all. But they play Nap all night and then they'd finish up with a 45. And that took place every Sunday night here for a long time. And all the neighbours who were interested in playing cards would gather from Roscommon to Killavella up into Garnbawn. And around Christmas time, my mother she'd get them tea and barnbrack. That was a staple day during Christmas at that time, tea and barnbrack. But it would only happen around Christmas. At other times of the year, they'd come and they'd play their cards, and when it was finished, they'd all go home. During the week then, a small number may congregate at Clooney's and have another game of Nap at 25s. And that had happened at Clooney's maybe a couple of nights during the week. And that was how people entertained themselves around here at that particular time. And there was no electricity at the time. So how was the place lit up? Well, it was lit up by this lamp here. This lamp was called an Aladdin lamp, and it had 120 candle power. It was a great light. They often said that if they were travelling, there wasn't the same amount of trees out then as there is now, blocking off the view. But it was said that if you were travelling along the old Dublin Road, at where the Racket Hall Hotel is now, and looked up, you could see our light from there. So that's what lit up the house, and it was quite a good light, and that's the light that we did our homework with during all those years.
And the men would be smoking, and would they be playing for money?
They'd be playing for money, but small money. Like the money they were playing for, it would neither make in or break you. And there'd be no drink involved at all, but there would be smoking. When you look back on it now, the place be stinking with cigarette smoke. And nobody minded it at the time. But sure, if it was to happen now, there'd be a revolution. But that's the way it was.
This house had a wireless in your young days, Paddy. You must have stories about that time.
Yeah, we have. There were only two houses in the locality had radios at that time, and at that time I mean, say, the 40s and maybe very early into the very early 50s, but mostly in the 40s. We had one here, and McMahon's in Stoke had another one. And the radio, which is the only form of entertainment, I suppose, that people had at that time, it was run on wet batteries and dry batteries. There was a wet battery and a dry battery, and the trouble was that you could be in the middle of a hurling match and the wet battery would go. Generally the wet battery went, not the dry one. And then I remember one match here. They were all gathered here, they were sitting outside, it was a lovely summer's day, and they were listening to the match. And at half time did the blinking battery go. And everyone took off as fast as they could up to Mars to hear the second half. I can always remember that. And the match in question was the 1944 All-Ireland between Roscommon and Kerry. And Roscommon won. And there was a good few of the lads who were over from Roscommon off the end, There was a fellow playing with Roscommon called Frankie Kinloch, and he was from Shannon Harbour. And I remember one of the lads saying, coming down with one, who said, only for Duffy man today, Roscommon wouldn't have won that All-Ireland. I can always remember that. But it played a great role, so it did, at that time, Micheál O'Hare broadcasting matches, All-Irelands, Railway Cup finals. There wasn't as many matches broadcast then as there is now, but they did broadcast the All-Irelands, the All-Ireland semi-finals, and Railway Cup finals, which were a very big thing at that time. And in the 40s, with regard to, I can remember one Railway Cup in particular, Leinster, I don't know who they were playing, whether it was Ulster, Connacht or Munster, I don't know, but they were losing. And they brought on Tommy Murphy. Tommy Murphy was the boy wonder for Greg Cullen, one of the greatest footballers, the greatest footballer possibly Laois ever produced. He won the match on his own. Of course, there was a great sense of pride when anyone from Laois, at Tommy Murphy doing so well. Laois had a great football team at that time. There was the Delaney's from Stradbally, and there was Jim Sayers from Timoho, and they had a terrific team. In 1946, they were Leinster champions and got to the All-Ireland semi-final, and Roscommon beat them in the semi-final. Kerry beat Roscommon then in the final after. And then if you moved on a few years, up to the late 40s, it was Laois hurling came to the fore. And of course they got to the All-Ireland in 49, they were badly beaten, but still at the same time they had a great hurling team at that time. Paddy Rustico and Styles and Jimmy Murray and Harry Gray, all those were legends of Laois hurling. And so that's, in that sense, the radio played a big part in the life of the people at that time. And of course, you know, the weather forecast, you mightn't think it, but there was rudimentary forecasts out at that time. I remember 1947, it was a terrible bad year. It snowed for months. And I remember they were here rambling one night, and the forecast said that there was a depression coming in from the southwest, and the snow was to go. Well, they were delighted, but sure, it never went. It lasted for another month. But forecasts were a very important part of the radio as well. You know, up to that, if I could make an aside, the only forecast we had here was you'd go out and you'd stand out there and you'd look and you see was Keeper capped. Now Keeper Hill is a hill you can see from here, but the best weather forecast we had up to that was to go out and see whether Keeper was capped.
The Dooley family has always been associated with hurling, and looking at your medal collection, Paddy, a great collection of medals, could you say a few words on them?
Yeah, I could, I suppose, yeah. I haven't as big a collection as an awful lot of players in Camross have, but my claim is that my collection is a very varied collection, because I played with more hurling clubs than Robbie Keane had soccer clubs. The top two medals here were one in Sligo, one with the Crave Club and another with the Sligo county team. While I was in Sligo playing with the county team, we actually won the Four Counties Championship, which was a championship in Connacht for the Connacht counties excluding Galway. The winners then went on to play Galway in the final. Galway hammered us, but however, that's beside the point. We won the Four Counties for the only time Sligo ever won it, and the only time that Sligo ever beat Roscommon in hurling. The other medals here that I have down here, we'll go to this one next. This is a Killavella medal that I won with Killavella in the Offaly Junior Hurling Championships. When I came back from Sligo, I hurled in 56 with Killavella, and we were fortunate enough to win that medal. And we played, I remember on a cold November day, we played the Blackwood Rovers in Tullamore to win that one. Down here we have medals won with Camross. I first hurled with Camross in the year 1961. Now there's a story about how I started hurling with Camross, I'll tell you that after. But I started hurling in 61, and in 61 and 62 we were hammered. Burson Ossory hammered us both years. But then in 63 we won the county championship, and as I say, as far as Camross hurling is concerned from that on, the rest is history. Now, while I was hurling with Killavella in 56, I played the following 2 years with Offaly Juniors. And I remember getting picked on the panel for the seniors for 57, but I'll tell you that little story after what happened there. And then I came, while I was playing with Camross, I played with Laois in the 60s as well. So, you know, one of the great, my brother Pierce played in the 60s with me. He started off in 63, the year that I won the first championship with Camross. We were both in the half-forward line. Pierce is a very good hurler. He has the unique distinction of having played legally in county finals in 2 different counties. He played with Camross here in Laois, and he played with UCC in the Cork County final. He played in 2 Cork County finals with UCC and played in the same years with Camross in 2 county finals.
Paddy, you didn't mention there in your medals, you have 6 inter-firms medals with ESB, All-Ireland medals. Could you describe those?
Yeah, well, I have indeed, yeah. Inter-firm, I worked in the ESB, as you know, and in 1958, the ESB decided to have inter-firm competitions between all the different districts within the ESB network in Ireland. And of course I worked in Portlaoise. Portlaoise was the headquarters, and I played with Portlaoise, and we were fortunate enough to have a great team. And we won 6 inter-district All-Ireland medals with the ESB Portlaoise. Our great opponents at the time was Cork. Now, we had some terrific matches against Cork. One player who played with Cork was one of the great hurlers of his time, was Willie John Daly. But Cork used to go into these matches, they're red-hot favourites, and we beat them every time. It was some of the matches some of the best matches I ever played in was the finals against Cork in ESB inter-district championships. There's no doubt about that, and there were some great hurlers on that ESB team. One of the best hurlers I ever played with was Matty Stapleton of Slieve. How he never played with Tipperary, I don't know. He was unfortunate, I know, because in the middle of his career he broke his leg, which was a big drawback to him. But he was a terrific hurler. Another fellow I played with was Jim Hennessy from Tipperary and Kilkenny. Jim played with Kilkenny in his time. He was another very good hurler. And I played with a lot of good hurlers. In Camross, there were some terrific hurlers in the Camross team, and I'm not going to name any of them, but there was great hurlers in that team. And although it was a team rather than any individual being really outstanding, and we played against great hurlers, both in Laois and elsewhere. Christy O'Brien, I suppose, was one of the best of them. Christy was a great hurler, a gentleman, both on and off the field. And others that I played, when I was playing with Killavella in Offaly, I came up against some great hurlers. Pat Spellman, Carrigan Riverstown, and Joe Murphy at Kilcormac, Dermot Flanagan. They were fellas that played for Offaly for years and years. And I remember once in a challenge match in Bourg, where the Offaly juniors played the Offaly seniors, I played on the great Malay, Paddy Malay Drumcullen. And that's some of the memories I have from the hurling days now.
And Paddy, just getting back to your story about Camross, your first games with Camross weren't as straightforward as may be imagined.
Well, playing with Camross wasn't as straightforward as you might think. When I came back from Sligo, I played with Killavella because I'd gone to school in Killavella, and as you know, I have an awful lot of relations down around Killavella, and I hurled with Killavella, won the championship with Killavella in 56, continued hurling with Killavella in 57, 58, 59 and 60. And in 1960 we got to the intermediate hurling final in Offaly. We beat the Blackwood Rovers in the semi-final, and I was working in Portlaoise at the time, and came home on a Saturday evening prior to the county final, as I thought, to be greeted with the words that the county final is off. The Blackwood Rovers have objected to you. So they objected to myself and my late brother Michael, God rest him, because we were living in Laois. And we lost the match. Killavella lost the match, so they did. Well, that then created a bit of a problem for me. There was little point in continuing to hurl with Killavella while I was, if I was illegal, which I was. So it had another little, I remember I was telling about been on the panel in 57. I remember that we were going to play Laois in the first round of the championships, and I was on the panel, and this fella came to me and he says to me, he says, have you heard a bit of land at all in Offaly? And at the time we hadn't. We have since, but at the time we hadn't. So what happened in 1960 didn't happen overnight, if you know what I mean.
And Paddy, not interrupting, did people call up to the house here to your parents looking to see where you lived?
The week before the objection was lodged, this was now in the month of November. The week before the objection was lodged, there was a knock came to the door. I wasn't here, of course, it was in Port Leisha. So my mother answered it, and there was these two fellas at the door, and they said, we're gone astray, where are we? So she, suspecting nothing, told them that they were in Nealstown. And what county would we be in now, they said. Oh, you're in County Laois now. So they thanked her and went off. But, we always thought that these crowds, they weren't lost. They were just confirming that we lived in Camross, in County Laois. And I remember Finlawler coming. Finlawler, I suppose, I couldn't run down and say, look at lads, I'm illegal to hurl with Kilvella, can I hurl with Camross? That wouldn't be me. I remember Finlawler coming down. And Finch was the first contact I had with hurling in Camross. Finch was the captain at the time. And it was really under Finch's wing, I suppose, I went to play with Camross first. And I remember the first match I ever played with Camross. It was a junior match, actually. It was against Shanahoe. I remember it well. And I hurled fairly well at the time. In that match, I remember well, I got 5 or 6 pints. And I suppose the Camrosses thought they had a second, I don't know what coming to them, but whatever. Anyway, I got settled in well in Camross and had some great years with him.
You're known as the weatherman of the Slieve Blooms. What's the story there?
Yeah, well, the story is this. In early 1953, the Met Office contacted the Guards Barracks in Burson, Ossory, and they asked them to recommend someone on the southern slopes of the Slieve Bloom Mountains who would record rainfall records for them. And you could say the rest is history. They came out here, so we are keeping those rainfall records since 1953. And for the past 15 or 16 years, we have been keeping temperature records. But getting back to the rainfall records, how is it done? Well, each morning during the summer at 10 o'clock and in the winter at 9 o'clock, we record both rainfall and temperature records. The rainfall is done like this. This copper cylinder contains a bottle which contains the amount of rainfall that fell in the past 24 hours. And now, for demonstration purposes, I'll just show you how it works. We have this glass tube. We empty the bottle into the tube. It's measured in millimeters. And from that, we can gauge the amount of rain that fell in millimeters in the past 24 hours. And that's how the rainfall records
are kept.
Now, maybe we should go to the temperature to give you an idea of how we work temperature. This box is a Stevenson box, and it is in this is the temperature box, we call it. And it has got here 4 thermometers. The top one measures temperature as it is at this moment. This one measures temperature. This one measures humidity as at this moment. Then the 2 horizontal ones at the bottom. The top one gives us the highest temperature reached in the last 24 hours, and the bottom one gives us the lowest temperature reached in the past 24 hours. Like the rainfall, this is recorded in the winter time at 10 o'clock in the morning and in the summer time at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, maybe you'd like a few interesting statistics about this. In the past, we started this in 1953. The wettest year that we had since then was only 2 years ago, in 2012. And the wettest month we ever had in those years was in the month of June 2012, just 2 years ago. An enormous amount of rain, 284 millimetres of rain fell in that month. And and all the time we're keeping it, no month came near that. And then for the record, the driest month we ever had, or the driest year, was 1971. That was a dry year, and again, no year before or since even came near it. The wettest day we ever had was 84.9 millimetres of rain, and that fell during the first week on a day, I'm not sure of the date, in the first week of August 1984. So there's a few interesting statistics for you relating to this rainfall and temperature recordings.
You were brought up on a farm, Paddy. You must have good memories of that time.
Yeah, when we were young, everything had to be done manually and done with horses. The sowing, the tilling, the ploughing, the reaping, all that had to be done manually. The only bit of machinery we ever saw when we were young was the threshing machine when it came around to do the threshing. We didn't have a tractor here till I suppose it was the mid-50s, before everything had been done with horses before that. So it was hard work, but nobody minded because everyone was in the same boat, that's the way it was.
And Paddy, Fair Days must have been a big occasion.
Yeah, Fair Days was a big occasion. The fair in Roscrea was held on the third Monday of every month, and you'd have to have the cattle in, standing on the streets of Roscrea. You'd want to have them in by 6, half 5 in the morning. So, and generally the cattle were sold at that time around the months of February and March. So it was pitch dark when you were taking in the cattle, and people in Camross used to come down halfway. Some used to go as far as Dempsey's in Killavella. More used to leave them here. I remember now Mick Higgins of Mount Hall leaving cattle here so that he'd have half the journey done going into Roscrea. And I can remember one particular fair day. It was the fair day in February 1947, and it was the time of the big snow, and people had cattle to go to Roscrea, to the fair, and the roads were blocked, and the men got out before the fair with shovels and cleared a passage to get the cattle lower down the country where the snow wasn't as bad. So, you'd be into Roscrea then, and you'd be standing with the cattle somewhere around the fountain in Rosemary Street, and the day would be as long, so it would. You might, if you were lucky, sell the cattle. If you did, then you had to take them up to the railway station to put them on a wagon, because there was no cattle trailers like there is today. So then, if you had them sold, you'd come back. You'd get a bit of a treat. I remember it was during that time I got my first glass of Coca-Cola. I thought it was gorgeous. And then you'd get your dinner. You'd get your dinner in what? At that time they were called eating houses. And we used to get our dinner in, we got it in Halfpenny Nell's up in the main street, or down at the bus stop as well. And there were great days, but you'd be tired after. There's a lot of hard work in it.
Yeah, I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
The Dooley family had a turf bank, and it was on a mountain bog.
That's right. In common with all other families, we had our turf banks, and my father used to cut the turf. He was the slayings man. He considered himself an expert at the job. I used to be on the barrow. We'd load the barrow with the turf as it was being cut and wheel it out to wherever necessary. And in due course then, depending on the weather, that turf would be footed, and hopefully the year would be fine and that things would progress and that it would be brought home in the autumn. It was a lot of hard work, so it was on the bog, an awful lot of hard work. But of course I remember one of the big things about the bog didn't happen on the bog at all. It happened above in Clooney's, around Clooney's fireplace. All the farmers who had turf banks got together to plan on a day to repair the bog road, because after the winter the road would be cut up, as you could well understand, and it used to be great. Some of them were very concerned about the horses' feet, and that there'd be soft sand or that under the horses' feet. More would be more worried that there wouldn't be huge big potholes that would turn over the cart. And the argument was which was to get priority. But anyway, compromises would be reached, and the bog road would be fixed reasonably well anyway. And we, as I say, it was hard work. And we couldn't wait at times for the evening to come. And watches weren't that plentiful at that time. But we had our own watch. It was steam trains, I'm talking about now in the 40s. It was steam trains, and we could see the train leaving Portlaoise. Coming on, and at that time there was a station at Kilbrickin. You could see it stopping at Kilbrickin, heading then for Ballabrophy, and then coming on towards Roscrea. And when the train disappeared behind the mountain at the Forked Lock, it was as good as a signal coming out of a factory. It was time to go home.
Time to go home.
Yeah, time to go home.
To conclude this very interesting interview, you've seen a lot of changes in your life.
I have indeed, yes. Most of the changes are for the better. A few of them maybe not so good. For example, people are living longer now and they're living healthier. And standards of living have increased out of all proportion since the time I was a young fellow. And I think one other big change I noticed is in education. The introduction of free education by Donogh O'Malley was one of the greatest things ever happened in this country. You know, there are a few things maybe not so good. I think we have lost to a certain extent the great sense of community that existed when I was growing up as a young fellow. Families today tend very much to keep to themselves. They're very private, and there's the interaction between neighbours and all that which existed when I was young doesn't seem to exist on the same level today. You know, the electronic gates have replaced the half door to a large extent. I suppose another thing that I notice is there's a serious decline in religious observance. And I think that's a bit of a pity too, because in olden days, in times of crisis and that, people had their faith to fall back on, and it was a great consolation to them. And they haven't got that today.
I hear the sweet voice of my mother. She kneels by her own settled bed. My brothers and sisters are around her. The family rosary is said. I see once again the old chapel. It echoes the organ's sweet tune. Oh, why did I ever abandon my home at the foot of Slieve Bloom? My dreaming of homeland is over. A vision more radiant I see. My God and my mother are waiting with heavenly angels for me. There is one thing I'll ask of my Saviour. Now my life it has come to full bloom. Please God, won't you make me my heaven, near my home at the foot of Slieve Bloom. There is one thing I'll ask of my Saviour. Now my life it has come to full bloom. Please God, won't you make me my heaven, near my home at the foot of Slieve Bloom.